one of my subscribers asked about writing high converting copy in the health niche while also staying compliant. And so I'm just going to break down my answer for that. First and foremost, learn the rules and don't break them. When I've heard about people actually getting in trouble, and when I've seen people actually getting in trouble for these things, most often it's because they don't fully understand the rules that are made public about making promises in their specific niche. So health is like one of the big ones that is by far the most difficult to remain compliant in. And one good example of that, so it's difficult and not. It's not because there's so much information out there about like, these are the rules, don't break them. So one of the big ones is the idea of structure and function claims. So one of the fastest ways that you can get in trouble in the health industry is by actually promising a cure to a known disease. And so if you talk about a very specific like known disease and you talk about a cure, well, that's like it's a giant red flag. Sometimes there's more flexibility if you're just selling an information product, but there's no guarantee of that. Rather, what the FDA and other regulatory bodies want you to do is they want you to talk about the structure, meaning if this is about heart health, you don't talk about heart attacks or cardiovascular disease or anything like that. You talk about the health of the heart. If it's about lung health, you talk about the health of the lungs. If it's about whatever, you talk about the health of the structure, the physical structure in the body versus the conditions that may befall that. So even like ADHD, I have ADHD, and it's much easier to talk about brain health and the ability to make your brain function correctly or like normal versus talking about ADHD, right? Like it's going to be far more compliant if you do that. Also, the other critical element, so that's structure, and then there's the function claims. And so if you're talking about ADHD, you can talk about attention, you can talk about focus, you can talk about things like that. You can't talk about ADHD, but you can talk about helping your brain focus in a healthy way, helping your brain maintain attention. Those are function claims, helping your heart pump blood like it's supposed to, helping your arteries stay clear to pump. Now, that may be getting into tricky territory there. Likewise, if you get into things beyond like the FDA's regulations, a lot of different ad platforms or ad networks have different compliance rules where you may be able to talk about blood sugar levels, or they may actually say that you can't talk about blood sugar levels in your copy in the specific platform. So I don't write a ton of, let's say, Facebook advertising for health products or whatever, but I do know, and I can tell you with confidence, that for your product, for the condition, there are very specific regulations as they apply to different platforms for what you're able to say with regards to anything related to the disease condition. And if you learn what the bad words are and you don't include them in your copy, and you find solid alternatives that your prospects will immediately recognize and understand, then that takes a huge leap forward towards being more compliant. And a lot of this may sound really confusing, and that can be the value of working with a compliance specialist. So there are businesses out there that consult people on like Facebook ad compliance, Google ad compliance, etc. If you are really serious about building a business in a niche where compliance is a big issue, then it's probably worth bringing one of those people in. Or, for example, most of the clients that I've worked with in the financial niche, they have people in the business whose primary role is making sure the copy is compliant. And so after marketing and copywriting and all of that has been done and has gone through all the copy to make it as high conversion as possible, we still have to run it through compliance. And compliance often has many edits that require us to pull back or change the language that we use. Another big recommendation in that regard is make sure that even as you're writing copy, all of your claims are cited, all of your stats are cited, everything that you've done in terms of establishing the proof, credibility, and believability of your copy. Make sure that you have footnotes. In some markets, I believe that Facebook actually strongly prefers or even requires you to have footnotes on your copy on the actual web pages. If you are writing health copy that talks about any sort of study or anything like that, you need to have footnotes. And the more footnotes you have, the better from a compliance perspective. In financial, we actually don't often end up putting the footnotes, but I end up including all of that in what my client gets as far as the copy document that they receive. Because likewise, like if there's any question about any claims or any specific things mentioned throughout the copy, it does give an easy reference point to go back to. Now, one thing that is, it's a big challenge, but it's something that's fairly easy to work around as well if you know that it exists, is you can't make a direct claim of a future result for the reader. And to some degree, it's actually worth minimizing in compliance, in industries where there is a heavy compliance burden. It may even be worth writing a version of the sales letter without the word you. Now, I understand that it's against like direct response marketing rules that you is like the most important word that you can use because you're talking directly to your prospect. But in compliance heavy industries, it may be worth not writing a version of the sales letter where there is no direct promise to you. Now, maybe when you get down into the offer and you talk about, we will send you, X, Y, and Z, then you may leave it there. But as far as the pitch part and where you start making claims about promises and so on, you probably want to avoid the word you. So what do you do if you can't make direct claims like that? And by the way, like in financial, one of the things that we often have to work in is like you could have turned this much into this much. You could have grabbed this big of gains. You may be able to grab this much profit. And there's all of this conditional language that is tied to any type of potential outcome. Okay, so if you can't make direct claims, what's the best thing to do? It's stories. Now, there's a reason that my story selling masterclass is such an important bit of training, because stories actually connect with us on this like deep level. That's even like before civilization, we had word of mouth tradition that created the culture that created civilization. And so as humans, we've been responding to marketing for, a few hundred years. If you go back, there's probably early forms of marketing thousands of years back. But in terms of mass marketing, like that's a very recent invention. But stories go back thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. We don't really know. And stories speak to us on this like really deep level. And they work. They work in marketing because they really connect with us. And the interesting thing is, stories allow us, because of how we see them. Like, I don't know if you've ever watched a movie, and like, if you think about it rationally, if you go in the movie theater, all that a movie is like light projected on the screen and sound coming, like vibrations coming out of speakers, right? Or you watch at home, whatever. But if you are watching a movie, that is all that's going on. Like, the people aren't real. The image, the world inside that movie is not real. And yet you can get drawn in and you associate with the characters in the movie and you feel their feelings and you you really start to form a connection. And that connection, that emotional bond that you have with those characters can lead you to things like feeling incredible pride if things go their way, or feeling incredible sadness if like there's a tragedy as part of the story of the movie. And we're, as humans, wired in some interesting way that we're able to feel vicariously through characters in a story. And so if you're not making direct claims, but you can tell your story, and your story is a compelling illustration of the problem that your product solves, or the problem that your service solves, or you have a customer story that tells a great like narrative arc of that, of them overcoming a challenge because of your offer, or even metaphors like one of my favorite old ads is the John Caples, "They laughed when I sat down at the piano, but when I started to play." That was not like, that may have had a root in a customer story, or I don't know. But I know that Caples repeated essentially that same formula with "They grinned when the waiter spoke to me in French, but their smiles turned to amazement at my reply." Like, it was the exact same formula. And I don't know that there was ever a real person that was represented by those stories, but instead they were metaphors of the transformation and outcome that you could get by buying the two different products in those two cases. So finding stories, finding compelling stories that are tied to the promise of your product, that can be a huge way to be able to tell whatever version of your product story that you need to tell without making direct claims and without going too direct in terms of any kind of promises. But instead you demonstrate, and because you tell it through story, your prospect has this natural inclination to associate with the characters in the story and feel what they're feeling and see what they're seeing and experience what they're experiencing. And it's an indirect way to connect with them and pull them into making all of those promises. Now, I want to tell you one more, what I think is a very powerful idea, and that's a concept that I actually got from a hypnotist, Mike Mandel, about. It's a tool that he uses in doing change work in hypnosis without necessarily adding a bunch of details. Because if you have somebody who is in hypnosis and they're imagining something in their mind, they're imagining a picture in their mind, and you add a detail that doesn't make sense, or that doesn't match that picture in their mind, it can really quickly bring them out of that hypnotic state, that trance state. And so Mike Mandel, he teaches this, and he teaches doing hypnotic inductions with it and all sorts of things. He teaches this idea of a nominalization. So we could talk about how you could create a 6-figure copywriting business in 12 months or less, and that is not a nominalization. That's specific. That's a direct claim. But if I tell you how you can create the copywriting business that gives you the achievement you've been hoping for, the success that you've been longing for and not achieving through whatever you're doing today, the freedom that running your own business can provide, achievement, success, freedom, like you can't put those in a wheelbarrow. They're names for something that cannot really be measured. They're nominalizations. Nominalization meaning naming of, like it is a name to describe a concept. So things like achievement, success, freedom, independence, health, well-being, love as a nominalization. Anything that you can't put in a wheelbarrow, but that is still a noun, like a noun being the name of whatever. That is that type of stuff cannot be the compliance departments tend to let that through because it can't be measured, right? And so if I teach you like how you can achieve independence as a copywriter, that's very easy for them to let through. Versus, I'm going to teach you how to get a client who's going to pay you $10,000 in the next 30 days. That's not something that they're going to let through. Like, that type of promise is very different. And so these nominalizations, understanding the power of those allows you to write copy that is in some way able to make very strong promises without it necessarily running up against the compliance issues. I know specifics tend to be more valuable than vague generalities. But when it comes to writing compliant copy, sometimes in order to get something through so that you can like actually use an ad network and then get the traffic from that ad network, like that's more important than writing what's going to get the highest conversion rate now. I would also say, as a final recommendation, this one idea: write for conversions and edit for compliance. So if you write for conversions, then you're going to capture as much of that like direct response magic as you can. Just recognize that you're probably going to have to pull back on a lot of it and edit out a lot of it. And that's okay. Like, if your goal is to be able to run very broadly on these ad networks that are much more compliant heavy, then do that and pull back, and know that the further you are from the click, the less you have to worry about ad network compliance. So if somebody signs up on my site today and Facebook, via a piece of Facebook compliant copy, but then 3 weeks from now they get an email from me that is not quite, or that has no connection to the Facebook ad campaign, then it's much less likely that that's going to impact my ability to run compliant copy. Now, that said, like, in terms of legal compliance, actually not breaking the law, there's no place where you should put copy that actually breaks the law. So be honest, be ethical, run an honest and ethical business that is focused on delivering a ton of value, and then just, figure out what the rules are for compliance in your specific industry and find ways to work around them. So, like, when you can't make direct claims, tell stories and use nominalizations where you can. So that's a bunch of ideas for you. I hope that you found them valuable. If you actually, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I would love for you, on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're watching up until this point, leave a comment below and let me know, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, what level of value you got out of this and why, any takeaways that contributed to that value. So leave that comment below, smash the like button before you go so you get more content like this. Also, so the magical algorithms of the internet know to share it with more people like you. You can also share it yourself with people who might find it valuable, other copywriters, other people writing in compliance heavy industries, and subscribe. If you're not yet following me here, you can do that. You can also go to breakthroughmarketingsecrets.com, get my daily emails Monday through Friday covering copywriting, marketing, business building, online entrepreneurship, success, and a whole lot more. My name is Roy for this video issue of Breakthrough Marketing Secrets. I hope that you've gotten a ton of value, and I look forward to seeing you again in your next issue. I'll see you soon. Bye.